Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AusCannaPodcast. I'm your host, Christina McMullen, and today I've got a special on-the-road episode for you. While I was in Melbourne last month, I had the opportunity to sit down with Adam Isaac Miller, a key figure in the Australian cannabis industry for almost a decade. As one of the pioneers in the legal cannabis space, Adam has spent years educating individuals and organizations about this evolving market. He's also the founder of the Insider's Extract, a newsletter with over 12,000 subscribers that offers valuable insights into the cannabis industry. Before we dive in, just a quick reminder. Keep sending in those rapid fire questions, because if your question gets featured on the show, you'll win an exclusive AusCanna sticker pack. On a side note, I apologize for the audio in this episode. It's not the best. Turns out I'm much better at miking up my guests than I am myself. It's definitely an area of opportunity that I'll work on for the next episode. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Adam Isaac Miller. We're going to get started with some rapid fire here. Here we go. Beach or mountains?
Mountain beaches. Yeah, where you've got that, where you're on top of the mountain and you can see the beach.
Okay, so kind of like Vancouver when you're up on like Grouse Mountain and you're faking it because you can see the water. Okay, all right, I see where you're going. What's your favorite way to start the day?
Favorite way to start the day is to have no plans whatsoever.
I like it. I like it. If you could only eat one type of cuisine for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Definitely sushi. 100%. Yep. No questions asked.
You're screaming Vancouverite to me right now because
Vancouver has some of the world's best sushi.
I like to say that they've got mom and pop sushi shops on every corner. Yeah, it's so good. Describe your ideal cannabis cultivar in 3 words.
Euphoric, uplifting, and focused.
Would you rather have a rewind button or a pause button for your life?
Absolutely a pause button. Yes, 100%. It'd get me out of a lot of trouble. Wouldn't need to hit the rewind button if I could just push pause.
No. I like it. I like it a lot, actually. Check it out. I've got my first listener who sent in a question. So shout out to George from Gundawindi. And he wants to know if you could get high with any 3 animals, real or fictional, who or what would they be and why?
Who and what would they be? Okay, if there was going to be 3 animals, I would choose Haku from Spirited Away, which is a white dragon, just because he is an incredibly powerful animal deity. I'd be keen to consume cannabis in the presence of a lion pack from a safe distance, because I don't want to be near lions, but they're such majestic big creatures. To look at them in the flesh whilst consuming cannabis would be quite a treat. And the third fictional what just randomly came to mind would be that Ted character from Ted, the little bear.
Oh, the bear.
Yeah, that would just be a laugh. You know you're in for a good time, and he's a prankster. So those would be my 3 impromptu rapid fire responses for what type of animal creatures I'd consume cannabis alongside.
I like it, and I think George will be happy with those responses.
Thanks, George. Definitely, that's not what I was expecting.
No, and they weren't really rapid fire, but I like it. I like it, which is why I ran with it. Anyways, if you could instantly become an expert in one thing, what would it be?
Awareness of my conscious state. Yeah, because then it goes back to that pause button. I wouldn't even need the pause button because I just know what's going on, and I could just be like, oh, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking, this is how my body's reacting. I'm an expert of my own domain.
Which is why you use the word focus as one of your words to describe your favorite cultivar. It's all coming together. All right, last question. What's one app on your phone you can't live without?
Oh, LinkedIn app. Yep.
Really?
Yeah, I use that thing more than I'd like to say. Yeah, it's my scrolling vice.
Ah.
Yeah, I like to know what's going on in the business world.
I think mine's Candy Crush. I'll admit it.
I'm not surprised.
I'll
Yeah,
admit it.
yeah, okay, that's my mum loves Candy Crush.
Mm. Oh my God, I can't even believe I'm going to admit this, but I'm on like level 15,000.
15,000.
Yeah, not 1 comma 500 15,000. I think I'm on 15,004.
How long did it take you to get to level 15,000?
Well, look, I gotta be honest. I've been playing it since my kid was little when I used to have to go to school to pick him up. And you had to, Canada, it's really cold out. So it was somewhat important to show up early so you could get a parking spot close to the door. And so I would show up sometimes like an hour before school got out. And so I would sit in my car and just play Candy Crush waiting for the kid to come out, right? So that's where a bulk of those levels.
How old is he now?
15.
Yeah, wow. So that's that's a few weeks.
I've been playing
more power to you. Yeah, I actually deleted a number of like not Instagram, but I'm actually on a YouTube detox right now. My New Year's resolution was to not watch any YouTube for a year.
Oh.
So I deleted that. That would have been the app that I previously would have replaced with LinkedIn. So now it's the LinkedIn scrolling. Because you learn a lot on LinkedIn because people are posting, whether it be something about their particular work stream or an interesting article or a research paper. You're actually able to find materials that have been curated by people across the industry. So it's quite specific and timely based on what's going on. So I justify it by dedicating a level of education towards my addiction.
I like it. I like how you're framing it. I really do.
Doing my best. Whereas the Candy Crush, it's just,
No, like I said, I'm ashamed.
it is what it is, and that's okay.
I said I'm ashamed to admit it, but whatever. 15 years, when you average it out, it doesn't seem that bad, or at least that's what I'm telling myself.
Look, I can appreciate that.
All right. So, Adam, for the guests that don't know anything about you, do you mind giving us just a brief introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Adam Isaac Miller. I've been working in the legal cannabis market since 2015, so that's now almost a decade. I got into the market just effectively by intuition. I was at my parents' house. I was reading about some of the work that was going on in California and just had this knowing that I needed to start focusing on getting involved in the cannabis space in Australia, and it didn't exist per se at the time from a legal perspective. So followed the intuition, dropped everything. And a few months later, a good friend of mine reached out to me after I built a website and did a couple of things. And he said, hey, my brother's coming to Australia. I'd love you to meet him. It just happened to be that his brother was the CEO of the second ASX listed company in the cannabis space. So couldn't have planned that better myself. And from there, I got involved with that organization to run a couple of their academic projects at the University of Sydney in conjunction with a couple of people that worked on the project. And that started my career, and since then it's been a decade of working with various organizations. Someone recently called me a Swiss Army knife in cannabis, which I really like because I've just had the pleasure of working on diverse projects, whether that be importing cannabis into Australia, exporting it into other jurisdictions, working with academic institutes or hospitals to onboard prescribers. It's been 10 years of a very, as you're probably learning now, a lot happens in a very short amount of time. And I've had that exposure to it. So I guess I have found my way in through passion and good timing and very much a persistent attitude because cannabis is a tough industry. It's highly competitive and there's a lot of regulatory constraints and a lot of TGA and oversight. And it's just nice to be showing up to something that I care so much about and been doing it for 10 years. So yeah, that's a little bit about me without going too deep or too light.
So, did you just kind of stumble into cannabis, or is it something that's kind of always been a part of your life?
No, not a stumble into. So my cannabis journey started before I was born. My dad used cannabis as a veteran in the South African after his time in the South African military. He had PTSD, so he was consuming cannabis every night to avoid nightmares. He had some pretty horrific experiences in the army, and wasn't able to sleep. So he was using it before I was born. And it was very funny because my mum was the polar opposite. She was the stigma profile. If you consumed cannabis, you're a bad person. So one hand, I've got my dad consuming cannabis and keeping it from all of us. And then the other hand, my mother kind of with that rhetoric, the devil's lettuce, etc., etc. But it was a part of my life before I knew it. And then I found my affinity towards cannabis in my 20s when I replaced my medications. I was diagnosed with ADHD as a child and was on various medications for that. I read a study from a professor out of the UK that ran a very small 20-person study using cannabis one-to-one, which was called Sativax, and comparing it to the effects of Ritalin, and found remarkable results within that small patient study. And from that, I started to appreciate the effects that cannabis had for my hyperactivity and inattentiveness, and it became something that I started to use quite frequently. Initially, I didn't really appreciate the medicinal aspect of it. I got into it from an adult use perspective, just using it because, I enjoyed it. And as the years have gone on, my appreciation for it as a medical product has advanced, and now I can appreciate both the application as a medical product and as a product for adult use purposes.
Yeah, I think it is very, very much adjusting your relationship with the plant, right? Because when I think back to when I started first consuming, it was, and I don't want to hate on Mexican dirt brick weed, but that's what it was. And it was, I was just getting high with my friends in high school.
We all got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's just giggles and good times, and that's just what it was, giggles and good times. And it wasn't until I got into my 20s where I slowly started to really appreciate what it brought to the table, right? I was in a lot of stressful situations. There were things that were going on that were beyond my control. And I get migraines, and one of my migraine triggers is stress, and it helped me kind of navigate some really, I'm gonna say, some really fucked up things that were happening in my life in my 20s. And I don't think I would have been as resilient through that period if I hadn't adjusted my relationship with cannabis.
I think I can appreciate that. When I started getting into it in my 20s, it actually came about by way of, I consumed in Amsterdam for the first time, had some fun with it, and that was it. And then I got back to Australia and I was going through a breakup, and my cousin came to me and said, just try some cannabis and see what happens. And it was remarkable. It was almost as if the depressive wave that was hitting me felt manageable. Didn't go away, it was manageable. And then from there, I started using it, and like you, had the fun expedition with it. And for years, I had a lot of fun with it. And then I put it, and this is the interesting thing about cannabis, whilst it is everything can potentially be abused. That's the reality of it. Now, I definitely can appreciate that I had an abuse relationship with it at various points, but then I put it down, and then I put it down for a while. So even though you can abuse it, you can also put it down. It's not, from an addiction perspective, it's one of the lowest, from a physiological perspective, it has one of the lowest ratings of addiction traits. Coffee is more addictive than cannabis.
Oh, I can attest to that in the sense that, again, teens, 20s, every day, multiple times a day, that's just what I did. And then I found out I was pregnant in my late 20s, and it wasn't even like, how am I gonna manage? No, I just put it down. I was like, I'm pregnant, let's put that down, I should stop. And it wasn't an issue for me, right? And so I get what you're saying. Anything can be addictive. Anything can, screen time, it's all addictive. But I'm with you, it is, you can put it down.
Yes, there's levels of addiction. There's psychological dependence and there's physiological dependence. I think cannabis has it's got a very minimal physiological dependence profile. I think it's more the habitual, that psychological dependence. And that's where, if you make the decision, you make the decision. We were talking before that I've done a tolerance break for about a month now. And the first few days were really difficult. I made the decision, and then it's been fine. It's actually been really beneficial. I can't wait to get back into it because I really enjoy consuming cannabis. It really does help me as a patient get out of situations that are very challenging when it comes to focus or dysregulation of my emotional state. It's a magical medicine. And yet it can be used in so many variable scenarios, whether you're out in social settings or you're exploring the top of a mountain when you can see the beach. and and ultimately it does have this remarkable trait by which you can stop. You can stop. You will have. I mean, for me, my withdrawal symptoms were agitation for the first day. I wasn't able to sleep properly for about 2 nights. Then very intense dreams, and now happy days. I haven't skipped a beat. And then I can tell you, because after about 31 days, your cannabinoids receptors will reset. The next time I consume, it's going to be like almost like it's the first time, which is just has that nostalgic effect to it then as well. So look, I'm a huge fan, and I can really appreciate the general diversity of when you put it down, when you pick it up. It's just, yeah, show me a medicine and a substance that has that level of, I guess, like scope and bandwidth.
The versatility.
Yes,
the versatility, right? Versatility. I love when I find a flower that can do something in small doses. It gives you one kind of feeling, one effect, one kind of vibe, if you will. But then if you have it in larger doses, it changes. It's different, right? Like there's one flower that I talk about all the time. It's in my rotation, and I love the fact that in small doses, it's my go-to for social outings. I love it. It's very social. I love going, talking with friends and that. But if I have it in like 2 dosing caps, or if I push it for 3 dosing caps, then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is a little sedative. I'm ready to go to bed.
That's what I find so interesting about the nuance of cannabis. It's funny you say that, because I also have that same experience where you'll have something that's really euphoric, but then you'll have it in a higher dose, and then all of a sudden you're sitting down and it's like, leave me alone, I'm in my own world. But in the smaller iteration of it, super talkative and very chatty, that's just, again, it's just so much diversity to it. It's very cool. It's yeah, again, that's kind of why I have such a nice and fond relationship with it, because I like diversity in my life, and this provides exactly that.
So how do you have conversations with people who, like your mom, who are against it or potentially don't see any benefit with it? How do you frame those conversations?
I try and meet people where they're at, and I want to understand what is it about cannabis specifically that you are opposed to, or what is your current understanding of it. No judgment. I just would like to know. Maybe I've missed something, and maybe you can educate me, because I don't claim to know everything. And then usually the most common things are just a lot of misperception of old stigma that hasn't been adjusted with new world evidence.
Do you run into people who give you because I do, where they'll say things like, oh, Uncle Tom did this and he da 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 and went off his rocker and da ba ba, and it's, it'll mess your brain up.
Yeah, that definitely, that's more of an older generation piece that I get, where it's stories like in fact, 100%. My mother would be like, oh yeah, do you remember Lauren? Yeah, well, she consumed it, and then she was out roaming the street that night.
Acting like a ninny.
Yeah, it's like, well, I don't know what she consumed. I don't know how much she consumed. We don't know specifically what medication she might have been on. And there are instances where that might happen. So when you are with good people and you have medical oversight, you're positioning yourself as strategically as you can to have a good outcome. And guess what? Cannabis is so varied in its makeup that if that didn't work, there's probably another plant that might work. And that is the incredible diversity of the plant. So how do I deal with it? I just present evidence. It's like, well, look, talk to me what's going on. Like, tell me an ailment that's affecting you right now. Most people will say, I've got a sore back, or I feel stressed, or whatever it is. It's like, well, did you know that CBD is an anxiolytic? Or did you know that THC there's quite a good evidence base that demonstrate that it has analgesic purposes, meaning it can alleviate pain by way either of perception, or we don't know necessarily the specific mechanisms of action, how it works, but enough anecdotal and research has been conducted to demonstrate that there's a use case to even just try it. And I would even go so far as to say, and this is something that I'm going to write on in the near future, but I think cannabis is an excellent first-line treatment. In Australia, it is currently treated as a last-line treatment. However, when you look at the side effect profile of cannabis relative, and the toxicology profile of it relative to other first-line treatments, you'd be astonished at the justification as to why you're prescribed the first-line treatments with the higher side effects profile than cannabis with the lower side effect profile. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that cannabis is one of the most useful, what I would call triage tools. Because again, like I said a moment ago, you might have that one flower that didn't work for Lauren, but then another flower that might work. You can expose her endocannabinoid system to an array of various cannabinoids. And if it doesn't work, well, now we know that it didn't work. And what's the side effect that she's most likely to experience? Munchies, sedation. She might have a bit of tachycardia, which is heart racing, or some paranoia. These are common side effects, but if you have the correct preparation and understanding to know what's going on, they're not so scary. It's like, hey, just letting you know as a medical professional, which I'm not, but I hope medical professionals do, the side effect might include some paranoid thoughts. That happens. But again, another hypothesis is, I think that the paranoia comes from misunderstanding of physiological presentation. So when you experience tachycardia, like a increased heart rate, a lot of people will start to think, why is my heart racing? Oh my God, am I having a panic? They'll get themselves into the paranoia by thinking that something's wrong. So the question is it the paranoia due to a side effect of the cannabis, or is it someone not actually understanding physiologically what's going on in their body? We don't know, and there's more research that needs to be done, but there's a lot of things we still don't know. So anyway, that's kind of how I approach people who have a misunderstanding. I mean, you deal with a whole bunch of people that are new to cannabis. Do you get much pushback when you meet new people who are naive?
It's interesting, the pushback that I get, right? For the most part, it's dispelling, I don't want to say rumors, but dispelling whatever they thought it was, right? Or whatever crazy story that, Uncle Tom told them, kind of thing. It is, I like to say to people, tequila gives me horns, but I drink beer, It's one of those things. Not all alcohol is good for you, but do you have tequila, grow horns, pick a fight in a pub, and then never have alcohol again? Maybe. But for the most part, some of us step back and go, oh, well, maybe tequila wasn't for me. Maybe I'll try vodka, or I'll try beer, or I'll try whatever it is. And that's kind of, especially when dealing with Aussies, that's kind of the analogy I use, in the sense that we drink a lot here, right? And so, again, it's different flowers bring different effects. They interact with everybody differently. What works for me might not work for you, right? Thank God I've been writing these reviews and I have nailed that terpinolene and ocimene, when they're together, that is my jam. It's almost like take my money. I love it. I can't get enough of it. But I've talked to other people and they're like, oh, that smells it smells like, oh, and I can't touch, and I don't like it.
That's a great guy. There's a study on this by Dr. Addie Wilson-Poe. She collaborated with Ethan Russo, who was one of the godfathers in cannabinoid research. And it's called the Nose. And it's a study with a number of participants in Colorado that they wanted to understand the subjective considerations that an individual take when choosing their cannabis product, whether it was the look of it, the smell of it, the taste of it, etc. And the number one gauge of what people would determine as what quality is based on the smell. And that's why they call it the nose. So if I smell a really gassy strain, it's just, or like a very garlicky, mushroomy strain, it's like, I'm gonna put that to the side right now and get me some of that sweet stuff. Give me some of that limonene, because that, I know, for me, has a better outcome profile. I don't mind, I can deal with the more gassy and the more garlicky strains, but I know that for what I want, which is focus and attentiveness, etc., those are just not going to give me that effects profile. And that comes from a mature consideration around how you use cannabis. I'm sure you've heard this a million times. I'm sure your listeners have heard this as well, but I'm sure we all know someone that used cannabis once and they were like, yeah, not for me, had a bad reaction, just putting that down. It's like the horn analogy with the alcohol, and it's just, I look at that and it's just such a shame because you've boxed it into such a category that it's so far from. It's such a complex plant, and like you said with the terpene analogy, you just haven't, you may not have just, it might not be for you, but if you just gauge it off one experience, then yeah, there are so many things in life that if you gauge it off the first experience and you never did it again, you'd be depriving yourself of a completely, rich experienced life with lots of diversity, and cannabis is the same.
I have a saying that I say all the time. Once a philosopher. You got to try everything once. How do you know you like it? How do you know you don't like it? Until you try it. Once a philosopher, twice a pervert. If you go back, you liked it for whatever it is. I don't care what it is, McDonald's, cannabis, who cares? If you go back again, you liked it. Once a philosopher, twice a pervert.
Then I'm an absolute raging pervert, it seems, when it comes to cannabis.
No, but I've used that like going through college.
Yeah, I hope I don't get sound bit on that one.
But I use that all through college, trying to explain away various adventures I went on. Once a philosopher.
Yeah. Look, it's the tapestry of life. You get to experience all these amazing things. Sometimes, you don't know if you don't try it, and kudos to anyone who tries it. But the unique thing about cannabis that doesn't make you a pervert by way of that experience piece is you might have had that, like you said, with terpinolene. Some people don't like it. And if that was your first experience and you didn't like it, it's like, well, maybe you're more of a myrcene, or maybe you like linalool, or maybe you like limonene. There's beta-caryophyllene might be a jam, but that's just a part of it. So I'd say with cannabis, to become a pervert, you need to do it like 3 or 4 times. And then yeah, absolutely.
No, I think it is. And that's one of the big things I push when I talk to people who are, in that medicinal space. I'm like, do you journal? Do you write down? Do you take notes? And it blows me away how many people don't, because I'm like, how do you know what works for you, right? How do you start to pick up those subtle nuances where, this flower is very, very focused for me, but if I have it after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I can't get to bed at night. I'm like, if you don't take the time to kind of write down what you do like, what you don't like, again, with smell or whatever, how do you improve your medical outcomes, right?
Even if you're not using it for medical and you're using it for adult use purposes, how do you improve the experience of what you define as recreational? For me, I'm not interested in being couch locked. That is one of the most popular reasons why people use cannabis. So if you know what you want and you know what you like, you can. It's the beauty of it's like alcohol. Now, fortunately, it's way safer and so on. But the analogy being that vodka will have one effect profile, tequila will have another, whiskey will have another, and people go through the journey of trying alcohol until they find what their brand is, and then they'll stick with that. So cannabis is no different. But because we're in a medical market, personally, my position on it is, I think that I would appreciate there being a medical market and there being an adult use market, and having them both separately regulated, and ensuring that the best quality of access is given to medical patients with correct medical oversight, with the more that you can work with a doctor that understands those nuances of the terpenoids and the various cannabinoid profiles and so on and so forth, the more likely it is you're going to find that specific product that addresses your medical or wellness needs. That's an amazing outcome, because now you've got a tool to function more effectively in life. And then on the adult use side, well, now you've got an opportunity to actually get a better understanding of what, so to speak, I don't want to call it poison, but the old saying, choose your poison, but it's not a poison. Alcohol is legitimately a poison. Your body rejects it. Cannabis, you have receptors. It is, in fact, it sits across all 11 major physiological systems in your body. It has the most diverse range of receptor sites in your body. You are literally wired to receive these compounds. So even if you're using it for adult use purposes, you're still receiving a therapeutic outcome because of your endocannabinoid system. So the more you can appreciate what that effects profile is, the more that you'll be able to enjoy it. And we're adults and we are able to make decisions. In America, last year, the total sales value of the cannabis industries across the country was roughly $28 billion in sales. That's up 10% from the previous year. Astronomical. More than 400,000 jobs created. Look at Australia. More than 3.5 billion in taxpayer money goes to policing cannabis, as well as that the market potential, which is arguably some will say it's roughly 5 billion. I'm more in the camp that it's above 10 billion based on consumption from the Drug Household Survey, which states that there's roughly 2.8 to 3.5 million cannabis users in Australia. If you look at wastewater data based on how much THC is excreted into the water, and you apply like an average price of $10 to $15 a gram, you're going into the double digits in the billions. So we are foregoing an incredible opportunity to develop a market that clearly demonstrates in Canada and America that it creates jobs, it creates tax revenue, and so on and so forth. So anyway, the long and short of it is, I'm a big fan of the idea of creating these regulated markets and appropriately managing them, and understanding that there's, in Canada, at the height of its medical market, there was roughly 369,000 patients. Today, it's probably at about 180,000 patients. It is decreasing, but there's still a lot of people that use it for medical purposes. So create the best possible market for both types, and you'll migrate money away from the black market, and you'll give patients a good access to great medicine, and you'll give adult use users what they want. It's like everyone wins.
I totally feel that here in Australia, we're really, really good at so many things, agricultural speaking, that I don't understand why the Australian government doesn't get behind our farmers, green light it, get rid of all the red tape, make it more accessible for these legacy green market people to get into it, and then, yeah, I'm gonna say it, tax the crap out of it, and then put that money back into education, healthcare, and infrastructure. That's my, if I ever ran for politics, I would legalize, tax the crap out of it, and it would all go back to education, healthcare, and infrastructure, because I think it's a huge opportunity for Australia. I mean, my God, we're so good at beef. We're so good at macadamias, mangoes. I can go on and on. Wine. I can go on and on.
We supply the majority of the world's poppies, over 60%. It's unbelievable. Common sense is not so common. I, a few years ago, ran for the legalized cannabis party, which was a cool experience. Very much left of center because I wasn't planning for it and never thought political living would be my jam. I didn't make it by one preference, but if I did, in fact, it's amazing because we've got some amazing people in Parliament now representing the legalized cannabis party, but that's a part of the initiative, is to bring a rational and considered perspective to what an adult use market and a regulated market would look like and how it would contribute. And the most perplexing part of it is, and I'm sure that this has been rattled off so many times, but the old, you've got alcohol, you've got tobacco, those are regulated. How come not? Why not cannabis? Most people go, come on, that's an old, put that away. You don't want to make mistakes from the past. It's like, well, if you really want to take that approach, then you'd put alcohol in a more tight category because it's harmful. But that's not going to work, because guess what happened in the 1930s when they did that? Al Capone. That people were getting killed for alcohol in the 1930s. Can you imagine a gang war for alcohol today? It doesn't happen. But there are gang wars for cannabis. Yeah. So what's the appropriate thing one could do? You regulate it.
Well, the thing with cannabis is that it's easy money for a black market, right? It burn and turn.
Grows like a weed.
Exactly, but there's no love there. You're pumping it full of whatever to get it to go big and bushy, if you will, and then you're hacking it down and burn and turn, burn and turn, burn and turn, burn and turn. So it's easy money, which allows them to go and buy other things, which contribute to other issues, right? And I do think that it is a waste of police resources to be busting these mass grows that are happening, in farm town Queensland, because it happens on a pretty regular basis, right? I'm like, well, dude, someone there knows how to grow something. Why aren't we offering them a job in agriculture? Why aren't we saying to them, hey, you seem to have a pretty good skill set here?
It seems that it's not as common. We've got some great growers in the space, but boy, could they benefit from some legacy input. Yeah, like we've been growing cannabis in Mullum and Byron and all of these areas for decades. It's just that's what Canada did. Canada has helped at least enable the legacy market in certain areas. I think, like, I mean, look at BC.
British Columbia kind of embraced it, whereas other provinces made it ridiculously hard for green legacy markers. They kind of, I want to say it was it Ontario that did it? That did. I'm drawing a blank now, but one of the provinces literally was like, nah, we're only going to have like 4 shops run by the province.
I think it's Quebec.
There you go.
Yeah. Quebec's got a really complex system.
And
it
it
makes
was
zero sense.
like nobody could get, why would you do that? Nobody could get into it. Whereas BC was like, okay, well, if you got a business plan, let's talk.
How do you feel being here after coming from such a advanced and arguably from a product perspective, one of the best markets in the world?
You know, I didn't realize, it's that classic, you don't realize how good you have it while the good times until they're over kind of thing. Like, I can't think of what the quote is there from...
grass is greener on the other side. You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah. Andy from The Office has got his little line about, I wish there was a way to know it was the good times before the good times were over kind of thing. It's kind of that for me. I appreciated it, don't get me wrong, because again, coming from Texas, and God, man, sometimes I wish I could just pull a nickel bag out of my purse and hand it to somebody and be like, there you go. You go try that brickweed, man, and then come back to me and appreciate what you got, right? So I did appreciate it in that sense because brickweed was shit. And it was like night and day, right? Because all of a sudden, like my flowers were round, if you will, as opposed to flattened and like
dark
just flat.
colored.
Yeah, and like literally, brickweed smells like dirt.
Oh, I thought it smelled like hay. That's way worse.
No, it smells like dirt, and it tastes like dirt. It really does. It's not that it's. I associate that hay smell with stale product, old product. And brickweed wasn't old, right? Like, it was coming across that border quick like. Like, I had a friend in university. I dated this guy in university whose best friend was a Texas state trooper. And he would tell wild stories about, so on the border, we're on a little tangent, we're on the border there with Texas. You've got Mexico, Laredo, right? Laredo is right on the border on the Texas side. And on the Mexican side, it's New Laredo. Yep. So when you get across the border there, like, it's literally like a turnstile, you know, you throw a quarter in, you walk across the border. It's pretty loose. It's kind of, now granted, this is early 2000s. Okay?
Yeah.
It's pretty loose, right? The real actual checkpoint that they're gonna bust your ass at is technically 2 miles north of Laredo, when you think you're in the clear. And all of a sudden, you get pulled over in another, and it is no joke, man. Like, this guy that was a Texas state trooper, it was like, he'd be like, oh man, like literally thousands of pounds we're busting in this coming through here every day, every single day. And he's like, and we're not pulling everything.
It's not
so
possible.
You got to stop to think about what's coming through that's getting by. And it just blew my mind in that sense. So it's fresh because it's coming nonstop, which is why I think it didn't taste like hay. It didn't smell like hay.
Just bushweed that was grown and just no love, no care, just mass production.
And they literally do pack it like a brick, right?
Yep.
Like it's literally compressed down in a brick, probably while it's still relatively moist. Like, there's no curing really going on there. It's and sent out, right? It's fresh in that sense because there's an abundance of it. It's nonstop coming through.
Well, I, like, even in Australia, like the black market when I used to buy when I was much younger in a previous life was never bad. It's always fine. But then after I started visiting the States and Canada, it's like, I made a conscious decision to never go black market because, again, you just don't know who's on the other end. And yeah, I hear this argument sometimes where people are like, oh, it's a plant, let it grow, we can just, and so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, you can, but it is a plant that has an incredible absorption profile by way of what comes through the root system. So you want to be mindful on what you're consuming in your lungs or orally consuming. And in fact, in the States recently and in Canada right now, it started in July, it's still going, but there was a product recall for incorrect label claims across Canada. And in the States, there was a contamination in like 5,000 vape carts of a particular pesticide, which causes nausea, vomiting, and seizing and so on. It's like, well, I would like good quality tested cannabis. I don't want to seize. I don't want to have a fit because I've consumed something that had a pesticide in it. Thank you.
Which is why I'm all for regulation. Yep. Let's regulate it. Let's legalize it, regulate it, move on.
And yeah, exactly. Let's focus on getting to space.
Yeah, there are so many other things we could be tackling right now. We don't need to be wasting our time with this.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it's just the joys of a new market. These are just, look, all things considered, these are wonderfully complex challenges, and we have the privilege of being able to solve them.
True. Do you see like any new like emerging trends that are coming out?
Well, in Australia specifically?
No, worldwide. I mean, we can circle back to it.
Well, okay, worldwide, I'd say the most interesting trend that is very clear in Canada and in America is the prevalence and the growth of pre-rolled category.
Oh, see, I would have said beverages.
Well, pre-rolled it's the number 2 category in each market. When I was in Canada most recently, I went to a number of dispensaries and asked them the same question: what's the most popular product? Why is it the most popular product? Who buys it? In the city, the most popular product are the pre-rolls because of the out-of-towners, and in the more kind of rural areas, it's the 30-gram bags or the ounces, because people just want to make this trip to the store once and be done with it. But ultimately, what I found was interesting was that the pre-roll category is just ripe with innovation because people are dipping their products in distillate and rolling it with Keith or putting diamonds in it. So it's really interesting because it gives that individual a lot more flexibility by way of choice. You buy one pre-roll, try it, like it, great. It's a lower cost commitment. Then you can buy more. Or you buy a party pack, you get 5 and you go out with your mates, etc., etc. So it was quite interesting to know that it was the fastest growing category and the second biggest category behind flower. Vape carts were following. Beverages in Canada aren't as popular because there's a THC limit of 10 milligrams per product. So the cost associated to that and then having to drink that much, so it hasn't taken off. But that was an interesting trend, and unfortunately, it's not going to come to Australia, that trend.
You don't think so?
No, because the TGA has very clearly stipulated that doctors should not prescribe cannabis via combustion. And that's why you have not seen any pre-rolled.
Oh no, sorry, I meant beverages.
Oh, beverages. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the challenge with it is then it's just Australia requires what's called good manufacturing processes, and you need to find a facility that has that. And then after they've done the work on the GMP side of things, they need to put it on stability, which applies a shelf life. So there's a lot of work. I'm surprised it hasn't come to market, but give it a year.
I think that is an up and coming area. Like I'm watching Tilray buy up microbreweries, craft breweries, like they're going out of style. And I'm like, well, why else would you be buying up craft breweries if there isn't? Because Tilray is a massive cannabis company. They've got their fingers almost in every country, right? And so to sit back and watch them acquire from Molson, they've acquired from Labatt's, they've acquired from Budweiser. Like
It's inevitable. Think about once you can. The thing about cannabinoids, when you get down to the more specific, and this will take more years, but when you can fractionate cannabinoids, like separate the individual isolates, and then you can reconstitute them with specific terpene profiles, you start to get into that realm of effect profile beverages. And that's where the excitement for me comes with cannabis.
Me too.
I know.
I'm like, I don't know why I'm geeking out big time. I'm like, oh my God, this to me is like Brave New World. And now all of a sudden I'm gonna like, maybe I won't own a vineyard, but I'll own a cannabis farm and I'll literally just start crafting beverages.
My dream my partner and our dream is to buy a restaurant in the countryside and convert it into like a library cafe and provide cannabis and food and craft cannabis experiences. It's just, that would be a cool life journey. Because again, it's just the thing about cannabis is it's a great connector. You could be in a new country, not know the language, but you smell that smell, and it connects people. It's really quite magical. So I would love to be able to rest my hat on a cafe like that in the future. But in the interim, yeah, I worked at a manufacturing facility for 3 years. We specialized in extraction, and ultimately where I was excited to go was exactly that. Taking those terpenoids and those specific cannabinoids and reconstituting them in a way where you can say, hey, let's use this for focus, sedation, let's use this for hyperactivity, like let's go crazy. Let's have a social experience. Let's put some CBG in there to mitigate or downregulate anxiety, and some CBD in there, and a small amount of THC, so you've got that psychotropic effect. And there's a difference, by the way, between psychotropic and a lot of people think that CBD isn't psychoactive. I hear that very often. It actually is. THC and CBD are psychoactive. Basically, the gauge of psychoactivity is based on how it impacts cognition. THC is psychotropic. So I always like to say, it's actually psychotropic. But anyway, that euphoric effect is what it creates. So man, who wouldn't want to have a bit of euphoria, a little bit of chill, a little bit of conversational spark? It's just, yeah, that's going to be great. So I don't see that as a trend today, because we got a bit more by way of industry growth to get there. But the trend around pre-rolls and eventually getting into that customized effect profile space, I would love to see.
I think for me, one of the products that I am patiently waiting for is a CBN nanoemulsion and a CBG nanoemulsion. That's because again, I suffer from the first pass effects, so oils don't work for me.
Really?
Nanoemulsions work for me. So if I could get, because I love my CBD and I love my THC, but if I could get one that was CBG and one that was CBN, then I would be literally mixing, no shit, I'll own it. I'd be mixing them and making my own basically daytime shot. Okay, we're gonna do CBD and CBD, taking my shot, and at night I'm gonna do CBD, CBN, and a little bit of THC. And literally I would, happy day.
The challenge with CBN, unfortunately, you won't see much because the TGA has prohibited the chemical creation of cannabinoids. And in order to create CBN, at least in scale, you're going to go through an oxidation process. So you could do that, but it's very difficult. But you can chemically create it, but the TGA is just like, can't do that. So.
Oh, you just broke my heart.
No. So I hope it doesn't break your heart. Someone just needs to in Canada, again, I don't know the specifics around it, but if you leave a high THC plant for long enough and you cure it, it'll eventually oxidate for a long enough period of time to convert into CBN. Then you extract it, but yeah, good luck.
I mean, I guess you need the storage to.
Yeah, that's why it's a commitment.
It's a commitment to do it.
Damn, I'd like it as well.
I know. So if anybody's listening,
yeah,
mic on, tap.
Yeah, please get some CBN products into market.
Yeah, like I said, I think that. Oh man, it made me so happy at night to have a little bit of CBN.
We still don't know enough about CBN by way of how it actually works. A lot of anecdotal evidence. There isn't a lot of clinical evidence that demonstrates its effectiveness for sleep, but that's just because studies haven't really been done. But anecdotally, it is quite clear that people find it effective for sleep. Whether that is the onset of sleep, or I'm not sure if it affects duration of sleep, but there are so many, you'd hear it from your contacts, and I've heard it from mine, but people find it very effective in the evening.
Yeah, my only real experience with it before I even really knew what it was when I was growing back in Canada. And I geeked out and I got really so I had a couple of plants going, and I intentionally harvested one early, and then I intentionally harvested one where I thought it was peak cloudiness going on. You know what I mean? I harvested, was there 3 of them or 4 of them? I can't remember now. But I intentionally harvested them at different points. And again, I didn't know what it was back then, but I knew that the plant that I harvested early seemed to make me extra giggly, extra happy. And the plant that I harvested late made me tired, made me couch locked.
Same seeds?
Same seeds, same plant. But to me now, I'm like, that must have been CBG because it hadn't fully converted. And then it was CBN because it had started to convert into, right? Like that whole process, right? And I think, again, same plant, if you will. I mean, no, they weren't clones. It was seeds, I'll admit. So yes, there were some variant, obvious. But
even with clones.
I didn't know at 23, 24 what the fuck CBG was, right? I just knew from that experience and geeking out with it. Early is happy, giggly. In the middle is kind of a little bit of everything, but more, do I want to say more high? I don't know how I want to describe it, right? All three plants had clear different effects.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about cannabis. You can take the same clone and grow it in different environments and get different chemical compositions of it because it's diverse like that. It's just, it's nature. It grows differently in different environments. So that's, again, it's so diverse. It's remarkable.
From a gardening perspective, it's neat to watch it grow, right?
It's quite beautiful. It's actually it's a gorgeous plant.
I gotta be honest, man. I used to joke back in Vancouver that if I ever bought a place and was rich and had a pool, that I'd have a cannabis plant like privacy wall. Because when they grow and they're big, they're so big and bushy and green. Yeah.
Have you seen those cannabis bonsais?
No.
Do yourself a favor at some point. Google cannabis bonsai.
Is that a rabbit hole I'm going to go down?
Oh, it's just if you want to see cannabis art, and you know what a bonsai, it's like the process of an old tree growing. You say, yeah, there are cannabis bonsais. It's just beautiful what people do with these bonsais. And they've got little flowers. Sometimes when they flower, you just see these beautiful buds growing and they just manicure it and they keep it growing. It's like, oh, stunning what some people do with their time.
With their spare time. I don't have that type of time. And that is just that. When I was talking with Genevieve from Stewart Farms, like she's in Canada, she can grow legally there, and she was talking about how, you become obsessed with it in the sense that she's out there every day looking at her plants, what's going on here, what's going on there, right? And then she goes to work and she's doing it all at work too. She's like, a lot of people don't have that time to be in their own garden, to be so meticulous with watching everything, right? Because again, growing one plant is easy. Growing two, relatively easy. 3, again, still pretty. But once you start to hit 4, 5, 10, shit gets hard.
It's why a lot of people struggled initially with the scale up, and they're building these 1,000 square feet facilities, and it's like, why all of a sudden now cannabis isn't growing as effectively as when it was growing in those smaller environments? It's because it's the controls and the variables. It's just more to consider, and it's a temperamental plant. It does grow really well, but it also is temperamental. So yeah, it just goes to show that we still have a lot to learn. Canada's amazing though. You can just, the stuff that comes out of there doesn't surprise me why the largest number of imports coming in from Canada. Like people are like, why? Like you're letting, Canada has not monopoly, but the majority of our imports are from Canada, like by a long shot. I don't know the specific percentage, but if you go on the ODC website, the Office of Drug Control, it shows you where most of the product comes in by way of import over each year. And every year Canada is the lion's share. It's the most mature and evolved market by way of just general experience. It's just had that time. BC is one of the legacy markets in the world. So I don't know if any, California and BC, which would you, what do you think? California or BC by way of,
So I told a wild story on Yosef's podcast about my adventure in California right after September 11th and how I ended up with some Cali chronic. I'm not going to retell that story. I'm going to tell you, you need to go find...
go listen to that podcast if you hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, go find that podcast that I did with Yosef. That's a fabulous story. You know what? It was good, and I enjoyed it, But nah, Vancouver just, and again, I think I was just really lucky that I got tucked in underneath somebody's wing, because like I came up and God bless his heart, he just looked at me like, oh, this dumb little girl from Texas who's never seen good weed, come here, youngin', and let me teach you something, right? Because the first time, he was a friend of a friend of a friend, right? And so by the time I showed up at his door to officially meet him, I'd probably picked up from him like a handful of times just through other people, right? But when I like walked into his place, it was like a bulk food store, in the sense that like he had some tubs and he would pull the tubs out and he would open them up and he'd be like, okay, Christina, so today we've got some blueberry kush, we've got some Holland's Hope over here, and over here we've got some, I don't know, that's just Tommy shit, he hasn't got a name for it, but you know, what are you looking for? You know, this is kind of like this and this is like that and da-da-da-da-da, and you know, what are you doing? What are your plans? And I was like,
what are your plans? It's a great.
I don't know what I'm doing today, but I think I'm going to do something outdoorsy. What do you suggest? He's like, oh, well, stay away from the one-hitter quitter with the blueberry kush, and maybe some Holland's Hope would be free. Like, he literally was a bud tender before we even like knew what bud tenders were, and it was so boutique. And I think because I was so like genuine in my like enthusiasm and wanting to know more, that he was like, all right, let's take you over to the island. Let's go introduce you to some hippies.
Island, yeah, because you would have gone to Vancouver Island.
Yeah, and so I got to meet some hippies on Salt Spring Island, though, right? Small little island, and they just grew beautiful plants, just happiness, right? And it was just, I don't know, it was like this magical experience. But I think it also probably had a lot to do with where I was in life. Right?
I would, if you took me there, I'd probably think it's a magical experience.
It was, and you know, like, do I know for a fact that that was blueberry kush that he had? No, because no, I didn't, right? But I'll tell you, when it ran out, and you had to wait X amount of months before he got it in again. Right? He was like, nah, I'm all out of the blueberry. Yeah, you gotta wait. And when he got it back,
it's amazing you even had that though, because in Australia you get what you get.
Yeah, which I'll be honest with you, that was one of the big pushes for me to go medical here. Is when I got here. Okay, look, I'm in my late 30s at that point. It's a little hard to kind of rock up to my kids' school and looking at the moms being like, who do I think here might smoke? Who might be my people here picking up their kid? You know what I mean? Like, it was hard.
Yeah.
And so I ended up bartending again, and I ended up meeting one of the guys that was like somebody who helped kind of around bar back kind of thing. And he was like, oh, I'll hook you up, don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, sweet, right? Cheap, reasonably priced, but it was the weirdest shit I'd ever seen in my life. Like, it just didn't look right. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, like, it still got me high, but it just wasn't quite right. And every so often it would give me a headache, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I met somebody else at the farmer's market. Obviously, at the farmer's market.
Probably a good place to start.
Yeah, well, you know, a little bit less black market, a little bit more green market. And, you know, we went out one night and I bought pitch. And he was like, what is that? And I was like, it's all I could get, man. And he was like, that is PGR. And I'd never, like, I know brickweed, and I know fabulous Vancouver gold, but I don't know what the fuck PGR is. Like, what is that? I've never seen it before, right? But then I was like, oh, this is why it doesn't sit with me and why it looks a little funny and this and that. And yeah, I could get it from the other guy, better quality green market, but I was just like, it's too hard. I'm too old for the bullshit, right? And that's why I went medical.
Well, I am happy to hear that you made the choice, because it's whatever the motivation is, having access to regulated and quality controlled is important, and you get that nuance. You find the right doctor who actually knows what they're doing. It's really quite a journey. You start to develop a deeper appreciation for cannabis because you actually get those nuances by way of effects or smells and so on and so forth, and you've got guidance. Because I mean, again, I consumed cannabis for years before I actually started to know what I was doing.
Yeah, same with me until I ran into this guy who was just like, this is what I have. What are you doing? And that was his thing. What are your plans? Yeah. What are your plans? That was what he always asked.
The one hit quit. That's quite funny.
And stay away from the one hitter quit. And it was back in the day. Blueberry Kush was everything a one hitter quitter. Like seriously, you load the bong with and you'd hit like once, and you'd be like, I'm gonna sit back on the couch. I'm good.
So when it comes to like enjoying, relaxing, watching a good movie, there's like, again, it's all preference. Like I said to you before, the gassy and the garlicky and so forth. It's not that I'm opposed to it. It's just there's a time and a place. And that's why, again, you got that beautiful diversity. It's such a diverse plant with so much effect potential.
Which is, I think, one of the best things about coming into medical and making that switch is, again, I read my product labels, right? Mm-hmm. If you read my reviews, you guys know that I do that big dive on, okay, well, what's the family tree? What's going on? Mm-hmm. What are my terpenes? Da, 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 da.
Where's this coming from?
Where's it coming from? And you don't get that black market, green market. You don't, right? You just don't. And again, through going through medical and writing journals and keeping notes, again, I'm on the other side. And now I'm like, yay, terpenoline and emycerine. But I wouldn't have been there if I hadn't gone medical.
Yeah, it makes it's a night and day difference.
It really is. It really is. Slight change of subject.
Yes.
Let's talk about your newsletter.
Oh, my newsletter?
Yeah. Okay. I feel like we've been all over the place, but we haven't talked about your newsletter.
So my newsletter, appreciate you bringing that up. Well, I've been doing this newsletter for about 8 years now. I started, and the intention was to effectively just curate some articles from various sources, and I wanted to know what was going on at a global and a local level, and I would take all the articles that in my view were the most informative by way of giving me a perspective on how the market's evolving, and I just chucked it in a newsletter. I've done that now for 8 years, and I recently paused it at the end of last year because I got a bit fatigued of doing the same thing for quite some time, and ultimately I paused it. I decided to survey the community, ask people what do they want more of, what do they want less of. And one of the pieces that was quite clear was that the appreciation came from, I've been working in it, I said, for 10 years. So it was an industry expert curating content for industry experts and for medical professionals and so on. So I thought, okay, that's cool. What else do they want? And they said, well, we want more of that, but do you have more experts that you can bring on? So I revamped the newsletter. I've launched it about 3 months ago, done 3 publications, and it's effectively myself, and I invite contributors to provide content to the newsletter. It's a platform. It's got about 12,000 readers or so. And what we do is we take the most important information that is going on in the globe, whether it be news or studies or case studies from doctors, and we put that into a format that's easy to digest for industry professionals, medical professionals, and anyone interested in cannabis in general. And it's curated by experts, and it's not like a publication site where you've got reporters just reporting. It is actually material that's been generated by experts for the intention of advancing people's knowledge base within cannabis. I'd like to call it an insight forum. It's about finding the insightful information that creates better thinking modalities for how we look at cannabis. So yeah, I've been doing that now for 8 years. It's a labor of love, as you would know with developing content, but it's there to provide value and it's there to educate people. So I am really happy about it. It's come a long way, and I'm finally at a point now where I look at it and I go, I'm actually quite proud of where it's come from where it used to be, because it used to be at 0 subscribers and now it's grown accordingly. So yeah, I'm really proud of it, and I'm really grateful to work with good people and to grow it. In fact, I was going to, outside of this, invite you, because there's no one doing anything for patients on there by way of patient insights. So I'd love to speak to you about that.
We'll circle back to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Patient insights are valuable. Like what's going on with patients? Let's learn about patients and what they're experiencing, because the last few articles, like we did one with Lisa Varley, which was fantastic, from Entourage Effects, and Lisa from Astrid, and Lisa Varley did a piece on insights from a national-wide distributor. So she talked about what products are popular, what the price points are, where they're selling, what are the most popular kind of categories of products, who's buying them. Lisa did a specific piece on what the women that come to Astrid are being prescribed, why they're being prescribed, what product formats they prefer. So you're not going to get that kind of information on Google. So you're getting actual data from people in the industry providing things that you're not going to find that.
No, I love it because it is. I mean, you obviously gotta like the topic.
Yes, of course.
But I do. I geek out a little bit with it when I read it because I'm like, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, that's interesting.
That's the point. It's like I like to find things that where I'm like, oh, I didn't know that before. Now I can consider if I'm planning something and I know women are more preference towards this particular product and they're affected by this particular symptom. I can now think more effectively of how I can serve, and that's the intention.
Yeah. Well, again, just in conversation, because sometimes people ask me questions and I don't know the answer, right? But again, being able to have conversations with women and say, well, you can try different forms. Have you looked at, this or that kind of thing? And it's interesting because it's different information, right? And the way I look at it and when I read it, it gives me another layer of information when I'm talking to other people from a different perspective.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, this is why your reviews are useful, because it's like, my favorite part of your reviews is your rotation strat, like the way you change your rotations. And I love at the end that even though you, like your most recent review, you gave like a 4 out of 5 stars, and you're like, no, I wouldn't get this script again. It's like, well, that's great to know. It's a great product, but it's just not for me.
Not for me. Yeah. Like, I just did one, and I won't say the flower. It's already out, and I gave it a 4. But it's like I gave it a 4 because for me personally, I avoid things that give me the munchies. And maybe this is just a hang up from being younger, but when you eat, it ruins your high. Your high's over. I don't know why. And so for years, as a teenager, it was like this thing in the back of my mind. Don't eat and ruin your high. Don't eat and ruin your high. So now, as I'm older, it's something that I try to very consciously avoid. I don't want to eat when I'm high. I want to enjoy my high. I want to enjoy the effects of my flower for as long as I possibly can. So that's why this flower got a 4. But the thing about it is that it's like my injured reserve. Does that make sense? Like, if you watch the NBA, if you're an NBA fan at all, San Antonio Spurs fan over here, this flower is like my Manu Ginobili. It's like the 6th man off the bench, right? No, it's not a starter. No, it's not on my rotation. But man, it comes off the bench and it does what it needs to do.
And I'm glad it's there.
Yeah, I am glad it's there.
Yeah.
But like I said, I gave it a 4. I didn't give it a 5.
4's great though. Have you given any 5s?
It's been a while since I've given a 5.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's getting harder to get 5s because I've really started to lean into my own personal preferences, is what it is, right? Like I said, because this other flower gave me the munchies, that's why it got a 4. But if I was somebody that wasn't too fussed with the munchies, it would have been a 5.
I love the munchies.
See?
Bittersweet, I hate them and I love them. And I love them at specific time points, like when I am going out for a nice dinner.
Which is why this particular flower is my Manu Ginobili off the bench.
All right. Going out for a really good dinner, I know exactly what's coming on now.
Yeah, I'm going to pick out my Manu Ginobili tonight. Yeah, no, totally.
It's just your diversity of exposure. It's incredible because it's just that palate. You advance your palate. That's how sommeliers are formed. They drink enough wine, they get enough experience. So your skills. Who would have thought that a skill set of consuming cannabis would be a valuable thing in this day and age?
Seriously.
Yeah, I often laugh. It's like if you would have told me a decade ago that I'd be importing cannabis for a living, I would have absolutely laughed. I'm like, what? Am I going to go to jail? And here we are 10 years later, and that's what I do for a living.
It's wild, right? Like when I started writing these reviews just over a year ago, a year and a half now, right? Like just, again, it was very selfish. I started it for myself, right? That whole Substack thing was literally just so I had a place to curate my thoughts so I could go back and find the information easier, right? And then it just evolved, and then all of a sudden, now I'm just shy of 800 subscribers.
Yeah, I saw. Congratulations. That's huge in a year. That's very impressive.
Right? Like it's awesome and scary all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, often new things are scary, but that's what makes them worthwhile because you're pushing your boundaries. Your growth is right on the edge of that fear boundary. It's like I'm afraid of this, but the more I can edge towards it without overstepping my boundaries, the more you'll grow as an individual.
Absolutely. I firmly believe that every now and then you just gotta jump. And you're like, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, when have you not figured it out?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what I try and remind myself when I take on something new. It's like, Adam, when have you not figured it out? May not have been perfect, but you've always figured it out. So trust.
And that's how I do a lot of things. I'm like, I don't know, I'll wing it, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, and you've done some pretty impressive things thus far. Like that Buds and Bowls event was awesome.
It was a lot of fun.
So impressed by that. The number of people that attended, the level of professionalism by way of the different groups doing education and so on and so forth, the vibe.
Everybody was so happy.
Yes.
And I don't want to say well behaved, but they were. There was no drama.
Well, it's because there was cannabis. It's like you go to a social event and you see someone yelling and being obnoxious and loud and aggressive. Are they smoking weed or are they drinking alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
I got to quote Bill Hicks on that one. He's a comedian that passed away, but he was a big proponent for legalization of cannabis. Yeah, it's just if you were going to choose a drug, why that over alcohol? Like alcohol, just again, not hating on alcohol, but let's be real. I would challenge anyone who has lived a life and done anything social and to tell me that they haven't seen someone who was aggressive when they consumed alcohol. Like, let's survey the audience. How many times have you seen someone who's smoked weed actually like get to that point of aggression and obnoxiousness?
Yeah, few and far between. Few and far. And as somebody who I did Greek life through university, I was a sorority girl, and let me tell you, alcohol and frat boys. That's
No, oh man, I got a daughter. That would scare me.
Oof. That's a whole nother beast. We're on a little tangent, but we used to do something called mixers, right? Where basically one sorority and one fraternity would get together and drink.
Yeah, bad outcomes.
Like that was the whole thing of a mixer. You were there to drink.
I'm sure there was a lot of regrets that happened that afternoon.
It's funny. The sorority had very strict rules. You had a buddy.
Yeah, that's very mature.
You had a buddy, and you showed up with your buddy, and you went home with your buddy.
It's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that.
It was strict rules like that. And then when you were going through your pledge period, you were sober. You were not allowed to drink because you were the phone call if a sister was out somewhere drunk and couldn't drive. And let me tell you, I was a bitch. I used to get trashed in downtown San Antonio. I can't believe I'm sharing this. And would literally get the phone from behind the bar. Because again, this is the 90s. We didn't all have cell phones in our back pocket. I would steal like the phone from like the bar that I was at. I would call the pledge mistress, who she's in charge of all the pledges, and literally 10 sheets to the wind be like, I'm downtown. Come find me. Woo! Woo!
That's actually, the fact that there was a mistress, I'm like, wow, how organized.
Greek life's no joke. Sorority life, no joke. Like, it is very, very, there's a lot of tradition with it, is what it is, right? A lot of tradition with it.
There's a lot of wisdom drawn from tradition. Yeah, it's like custodians passing on information. And like with the cannabis thing we're talking about, the legacy growers before, that's a custodian. They are passing on information from generation to generation. You would be foolish not to listen, or at least take note.
I'm sure when they first started doing mixers, they didn't have a buddy system, right? Live, learn, and now they do kind of thing, right? So yeah, I feel like this is a good point to end on, because now I get to say to you, I like to end things with a call of action or something educational or some sort of tidbit that you want to leave the audience with.
Call of action will be, if you're interested in the newsletter, adamisaac.org is the website, and you can subscribe there. Call to action, okay, or a tidbit. I'll relate it to cannabis because that's the conversational topic that we're focusing on. There's so many things that we could focus on, but ultimately, when you're dealing with people that are not familiar with cannabis, I think empathy is the most important tool to exercise, You don't necessarily need to agree with someone's position, but if you can respect it and you can hear them and demonstrate that you've listened and then have a informed conversation about what your position is, you are more likely to achieve a successful outcome by way of education because you're not judging or jumping down the throat. What I have seen and what I try and discourage when I see very passionate advocates yelling is that you are doing harm by way of closing the door of conversation. Conversation advances positions. Our minds are malleable, and good conversation is an excellent tool to advance one's thinking. So when it comes to talking to people who are not into cannabis or skeptical or stigmatized by it, it is okay. Let's start by having a conversation and understanding their perspective as opposed to judging it. And that would be my request to anyone who has interest in sharing. Empathize. It is a powerful tool to change the hearts and minds of many.
I think that's beautiful advice, Adam. I do indeed.
Thank you.
And I'll make sure to drop your website in the show notes.
Much appreciated. Thank you for having me. This has been fun, and thank you for your work, and I wish you continued success along your journey.
Oh, thank you very much, sir. It was an absolute pleasure to sit here this evening and chit-chat with you.
Pleasure then clearly is ours.
And that's a wrap for this special On the Road episode with Adam Isaac Miller. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with a friend who might benefit from some of these insights. Your support helps me reach more people and keep these important conversations going. Also, don't forget to send in your rapid fire questions for a chance to win an AusCanna sticker pack. Until we meet again, friends, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen. And remember, Anthony Bourdain once said, "The value of a dish is the pleasure it brings you, where you are sitting when you eat it, and who you are eating it with are what really matter."